Hey everyone, and welcome to this presentation. I'm super excited about this. I have with me Mandy Keene today. Welcome, Mandy.
I am excited to be here, John.
Great. I watched a presentation with Mandy that was about an hour and 15 minutes long, and it blew my mind. So let me just tell you a little bit about her, and I'll tell you why it blew my mind. So Mandy's been coaching clients from all over the world for 22 years. She's had over 30,000 hours of coaching, and a lot of this is hiring. And Mandy's mission is to empower people to tap into their inner intuition to guide them. So one of her favorite quotes is from Einstein, which is intuition is the most valuable thing. And I can't tell you how much I agree with that, especially in hiring.
Yeah.
She received much of her personal training by working directly with numerous high-profile clients like Tony Robbins and Russell Brunson, and pioneering trainers in the motivational and self-development industries. On the personal side, Mandy is happily married to the love of her life, Curtis, and is a very proud aunt of three nephews and three nieces. She cherishes living in Wyoming or in Idaho with her golden retriever Whiskey. So I love that.
Yes, I got whiskey here, John. She's down here by my feet.
Oh, sweet! I love Idaho. I'm in Utah, and I
Yeah.
come up to Idaho kind of regularly just to see friends, and I love it. So
People visit here and then they move here.
I know people keep doing the same thing in Utah, and I keep telling them Utah's a terrible place.
Right, right. I'm like, have you seen Napoleon Dynamite? That's pretty much Idaho. Don't move here.
Okay, so the presentation that I watched from you blew my mind because when we started Onlinejobs.ph in 2008, we looked for tests that Filipino workers could take, and
Yeah.
one of those tests was DISC. So
Yeah.
we've been having people take their DISC tests since 2008, and I didn't know why. I've never used it. And
Oh,
then your
interesting.
presentation made everything so dang clear.
Oh,
It was like, oh, I totally get it, and I've never gotten it, and I could have used this so many times over the years. So I wanted employers to have the chance to learn what and why and how of DISC when they're hiring, because I think it will make hiring easier. It will make the recruiting process easier. It will make weeding people out so much easier. The whole thing just gets easier after you've seen this. So, anything to add before we get started?
yeah, no, I have my own story that I would like to share before we dive in. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do
Because
it.
I'm a living example, John, of what could go wrong if you hire the wrong disc. 22 years ago, I got hired to be an administrative assistant on Tony's sales team, and I'm very grateful for that experience because I got to be in the Tony Robbins environment and I got to travel around the world, but I sucked at it. I sucked at it. And if you hire someone who, sucks at a job, it really wears on your self-esteem. And here I was in the Tony environment. I mean, there's not much, I don't know of any other environments that are more positive, but because I was doing a job that I sucked at, I started to wonder, am I not intelligent? Am I what am I worthy for? What can I do? And I was doing administrative work and I thought, this is so simple. Why is this so hard for me? And fast forward, it wasn't until I feel very blessed and grateful that I had a friend encourage me to try out to be a coach. And I was in the coach training. And I'll always remember the day that Robert Alderman, he's the man who taught Tony the disc back in 99. He walked into the room, John, and he taught us disc. And I remember giving him my disc and saying, why did I, suck as an administrative assistant? And he started laughing. And because he understood disc and I didn't, it was like a foreign language to me at that time. I'm like, why are you laughing? He goes, Mandy, you would be a terrible administrative assistant. I'm like, I was. Why was I? And he said, look at your C. And my C, as we're going to get to for those who aren't familiar with this terminology yet, my C, John, was a 1. Like it doesn't get much lower than that. And he taught me how that when it comes to tasks, he said high C's are task oriented. And think about administrative assistants, think about project managers, think about operation managers. They're very task oriented. He goes, you are a people person. You're going to love coaching. You're going to be great at coaching because you're all about people. I was like, oh, and it was that one conversation over 22 years ago changed my life because number one, I let go of the limiting belief that really wasn't true, that I was stupid or I was an idiot or I wasn't going to be worthy at being able to be a productive citizen of society. It wasn't that. It was that I was in the wrong role. And then the encouragement of, oh, I'm a people person. I'm going to be good at being a coach. And I've been doing it every day, since 22 years later. And so I share that story because as you know, this information about DISC is very simple, but I like to start off with that story is because it really can make or break someone's psyche. So of course, you as an employer, you want to set yourself up to win and your business to win, so that you have the right people for the right roles. And I have not met an entrepreneur, John. I have not yet met an employer who doesn't want to have their team enjoy, being on the team and they want to enjoy their job. Well, I'm living proof it's impossible to enjoy your job if you're in the wrong role for what's your natural strengths, what's your natural communication style.
So just hearing this story, for so many years, I've told people out of college, I had a job for 8 months. And my only goal when I had that job was to quit because I'm a terrible employee. And
Right.
it just clicked. Yeah, I'm a terrible employee. I'm a super high D,
Yeah.
right? And the incentive structure just doesn't work. And
IDs need to be entrepreneurs or salespeople or have some sort of leadership role.
okay, so you have an awesome presentation that I'm gonna share your screen, and then
Okay.
as you go through this, I'm gonna interject with stuff that I feel is important to
Perfect.
people hiring virtual workers, because
Okay.
it is slightly different when you're hiring a virtual worker than you're hiring a work in my office employee. Okay.
Sure. Okay,
Okay.
perfect. That'd be great. So this is going to be a customized DISC training for hiring, managing, and leading your team. And I'm going to do my best to stay in that conversation. I do want to let everyone who's watching know that I am going to talk about, personal. And as you're watching this, if you're brand new to DISC, I invite you to, if you have your own DISC results out, to be able to look at them, because the more that you understand yourself and your own DISC, that's going to make you that much better at being able to hire and manage others, because you understand yourself first. So that's the first step in DISC, is understanding yourself so that you can be better at hiring and managing and leading your team. So one of the things that DISC has really taught me, and when we think about entrepreneurship, when we think about hiring, we always hear that word leadership. Whenever I say a word a lot in a presentation, I always like to define it, because there's so many different definitions of this one powerful word, leadership. Leadership is a way of thinking, a way of communicate, a way of acting, and most importantly, a way of communicating, by Simon Sinek. I love Simon Sinek. I love this definition because it's a way of communicating. And that's really what DISC is. So here's what's interesting about DISC is DISC can't tell you what someone's skills are. So I don't know, for example, if someone's going to be a good necessarily copywriter or designer, because I don't know their training, their experience. But what DISC will teach us is how do they communicate, and how they communicate is going to share with us what are they naturally going to tend to be good at. And then, John, we are going to go into values, and that's going to really help entrepreneurs, business owners really know what's going to drive the people that they're hiring as well. So why DISC? DISC is powerful because it improves our relationships. And I firmly believe that the quality of the fulfillment in our life is in direct proportion to the quality of our relationships. And when you master DISC, you can build rapport with virtually anyone. Because you don't take, what I find when people don't know DISC and they don't know tools like DISC, it's super easy to take things personally, right? So like, I'm a very high I smile a lot. I like to joke around. I tend to be more personable than, let's say, a lower I. It could be really easy for someone like myself to meet someone who's a low I and be like, I don't think they like me because they're not as smiley. They don't laugh at my corny jokes or whatnot. Because I know DISC, I don't take that personally, because I understand, oh, okay, that person is a low I. It'll significantly increase your ability to influence, because when you understand yourself and you understand others, it makes influence effortless. And of course, that improves your leadership ability. And then my favorite thing about DISC is to inspire people to be their authentic selves. So just like my story in the beginning, I was beating myself up because I wasn't a good administrative assistant. When I learned DISC, I never tried to do that type of work again, because that's not my authentic self. You don't want Mandy doing anything that's got to do with a lot of details like administrative work. So when you use DISC, when you inspire your team and those around you to use DISC, we have more of the freedom of being our authentic selves. And I really love the benefit of learning DISC relieves the shame and the guilt, because I had shame that I wasn't good at being an administrative assistant. When I learned DISC, I realized, oh, it's okay that I'm not good at that, because I'm good at these other skills, these other ways of being able to add value. And then that is really what improves confidence, right? We hear that word confidence all the time. To me, confidence is someone who's able to naturally be themselves.
So I'm just going to add to this.
Sure.
In the Philippines, it's super important that you gain their trust. And part of that is once you understand how someone works, what motivates them, how they think, you can gain their trust so much better. And that's, in the end, that's where you really get a rock star worker.
Oh, I love, and you know what? How can you gain trust with someone if you don't communicate the way they do? So for example, as a coach, trust, as you can imagine, John, is everything. If my clients don't trust me, they're not going to get vulnerable. They're not going to get open. And so, I have in my coaching notes, I have some clients who are very high C's. And as you know, I'm a very low C. How do I gain trust with the high C? I know for me, I better be on time, right? If I'm late, that's going to break trust. So I know I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but that's part of the power of knowing DISC is you're going to know how to email differently to a high D. You're going to send an email to a high D very differently than you would a high C or a high I or a high S. And so thank you for saying that. So DISC, what does DISC stand for? The D stands for dominance. So it's how you respond to challenges. As you're going to learn here, the higher the D, the more you're bring it on. The lower the D, don't want to have a lot of challenges. So high Ds, like yourself, John, it's challenges you love. I find that if high Ds don't have a lot of challenge, they tend to get bored. Us low Ds, we're happy if we don't have a lot of challenges. So that's really what that D for dominance is. How do you respond to challenges? The I stands for influence. How do you influence others to your point of view? Higher the I, the better they are at influencing. The lower the I, the more that they really don't even care about influencing other people. Really, really low I's tend to be more skeptical, and they have a less desire to want to influence others to their point of view. Whereas us high I's, we want to influence others to our point of view. The S stands for steadiness. S's is how do you respond to change, variation, and the pace of your environment. So higher the S, the more that we want to have routine, steadiness. We really rely on consistency. The lower the S, the more that you got to have variety and change. The C stands for compliance. How do you respond to rules and authority? The higher the C, the more compliant, the more of a rule follower, the more of a rule installer and enforcer. The lower the C, like myself, like our buddy Russell Brunson, the more we're rules are meant to be broken. So it's all about how do we respond to each of these. So Heidi, I like to use that picture of Mel Gibson playing William Wallace because that character was a great example of a high D. So someone who is a high D, now if you're looking at the DISC results, that means that your D is above the 50 line or their D is above the 50 line. So all these behavior styles are driven by something. Ds are driven by anger. And I know that could sound negative, right? Driven by anger. But I like to use William Wallace's character here because William Wallace had a lot of passion. And I find the flip side of anger is passion. High Ds are very passionate. And so they're driven by this anger because they want to get the job done. They want to get the result. The D's are extroverted. They're very results focused. So one of their favorite words are like results, outcome. I can tell when John and I first started communicating on Voxer, I could immediately tell John that you were a high D because you were right down to, okay, what's the outcome? And that's why I asked you, like, what's your outcome from this? Because that's how high Ds like to be communicated with. So you always want to bottom line it with D's, and you want to know, if you know what their outcome or the results that they want are, then it's so much easier to have that rapport. Now, D's can come across very blunt. A lot of feedback that D's get is they could come across intimidating to other behavior styles. So just keep that in mind if you're a high D. They can appear confident, and what I've experienced in my years of coaching, they can appear confident, but that doesn't mean that they are. It's just kind of our culture matches people who are bold and aggressive to being confident, but that's not always the case. But if you want to help a D experience confidence, you want to keep it to the big picture. When you get into too many of the nitty-gritty details, D's are going to check out. D's like to move fast. So like if I started this presentation, John, and I was like, hi, everyone. Thank you. John would be like, no!
One of the worst things for me is like a YouTube video that just goes slow. Let's just talk about, no, get moving.
What's the point? Give it to me. Exactly. So high D's, you got to talk fast. That, like, those YouTube videos are probably by a high S, John. So us high S's were a little bit more chill. We could slow it down. D's are great at sales. I know companies like Tony's where they won't even interview you unless you're a high D for a sales position. So now I do have to give a disclaimer. There's always exceptions to the rule. I know of a few salespeople who are lower Ds who really worked hard on the skill set, because just like anything else, right, it's a learned skill. But why are Ds good at sales? Ds are naturally good at sales because they're not afraid to ask for the sale. John, how would you like to move forward today? They're not afraid to do that. Us high D, us lower Ds, that takes more energy for us to ask that closing question. Ds, natural. One of my best friends, she's a high D. If she gets an order at a restaurant, she doesn't like it, she sends it back. She doesn't think about it. She's like, this is not what I like. This is not what I ordered. She sends it back. Someone like myself, a lower D, I'm like, can I eat this? Is it that bad? I don't know. I don't want to hurt the server's feelings. I don't want to, I'm sure the chef is really busy, and, it's a very different thought process. So that's why Ds are better at something like sales or just being in charge. Famous people, I put Russell in here because, you and I know Russell. Trump, of course, is a high D. Oprah's a high D. Anybody who's got that direct personality is a high D. So some more examples, and I probably need to. I got feedback, John, from some millennials. I need to add some millennials to this as far as famous people. But you get the idea. High D is like Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Charles Barkley. They're very intense personalities, very intense behaviors. And that's why they make great military leaders, football coaches, CEOs. I would also add COOs. Anything where they really have to be in charge, and you need someone. So if you need someone on your team to take command, is it a position like sales or a leadership position where they really need to take command? Then you're going to want to have a high D in that position.
So this is interesting, and I don't know this, and maybe you'll correct me, but my experience is that people in the Philippines make great employees. Mm-hmm. Like they're good at being employees.
Yeah.
And they're not great at being in charge.
Yeah.
And I would bet that in the Philippines, we don't see a lot of high D.
You're probably right, because the culture, if you think about it, if there is someone in that culture, it's probably very difficult, I would imagine, in that culture to be a high D.
Right. And for most of what people are hiring for, they're not hiring high Ds. And now exactly. Sales roles, obviously, that's great for a high D.
It is.
And you can find it. You just have to look. So. Great.
I'm going to guess that a lot of the people who are being hired for like VA work are going to be high SCs, which we're going to get to. But it's good to know these.
Right.
And if you need someone on your team to take a leadership position, if you get someone who's experienced in their role and they're a high D, they're going to take command. So this is a really good like cheat sheet as far as like how to communicate to high Ds. They just want the facts. They don't want to, they really, like my mom is very much a high D, and it's so funny because my dad's a low D, and hearing them talk, like my mom always says, just bottom line it. You know, what's the facts? What's going on? They like to dive in head first, usually alone. They're very competitive. That's why they tend to make great entrepreneurs, business owners, because they are competitive. They're awesome at their best and sensitive at their worst. And the reason why is because they're so results oriented, right? So they're focused on, I want the result, versus being as focused, like we're going to get to the I and the S's, where we're more people oriented. So that's why their behavior doesn't mean that them as a person are insensitive. It just means that's because they're so results focused. They're natural leaders. They tend to not be very shy or modest. Their inner need is to be in charge, just like kind of what you were sharing with your story, John. Like, you know, you've got that inner need to be in charge. Us low Ds, guess what? We don't have that inner need. We're okay to not always be in charge. Ds, they got that inner need. So if you have a D on your team and they're not in charge of something, they're probably not fulfilled. So if you give them something where they can be in charge of it, that's gonna do wonders for their morale. Because they love to accomplish goals. They like to overcome obstacles. You got a problem, I got some high Ds as friends. And whenever I have a doozy of a problem, or if I'm in a pickle, I love going to my high D friends because they love like trying to figure it out. Whereas as low Ds, we don't respond to challenges the same way. They relieve stress sometimes. And this is if they don't know what I'm about to share with them. If they don't know the key that I'm about to share with them, John, they can relieve stress by blowing up at others. But I'm going to teach high D something so they don't ever have to do that again. They tend to talk more than they listen, and they direct more than they ask questions. So again, think football coaches, army generals, CEOs, reporters. Like I would be a terrible reporter. Like as a reporter, you got to like get in there and you got to be bold and you got to be aggressive. That's why high Ds would make a great reporter, stockbroker, things like that. Okay. So best jobs for high Ds: sales manager, any manager position, chief executive officer. I would also add chief operations officer, anything that really they have a lot of responsibility. Any director of a department, police officers, attorneys, because again, you think about like those fields, they have to be okay with responding to challenges. And I put this image, John, since you're a high D, let me know if this resonates with you, of the best, because that high Ds are so competitive. They want to be the best. So if you think about it, you want to put them in a position where they can be competitive so that they can strive to be the best, because that's what high Ds care about. Does that resonate with you?
So that's, it was probably 2 months ago that I finally shared like my deepest, darkest, ugliest secret with my wife and some friends. And that secret was, in any situation, I want to be the best.
Yes.
And I want to be better than you at whatever it is. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
You got it.
Yes.
And for me, it's so terrible that that's how I feel towards people. I'm trying to tone it down and change it, but that's how I came.
Right. No. And so like if I were coaching someone like you, John, I would invite you to own it. You know, you own it. It's part of, it doesn't mean that it's like someone who doesn't care about that is a better person than another. It just like, that's part of what drives you. And if you look at like the natural order of things, like we need all different types. I'm very grateful for people like you and for people like Russell, because it's allowed me to do what I love. Because guess what? I don't want to be the one in charge. I don't care about being the best. I just want to help people. That's what fuels me. So because of people like you and people like Russell and other great leaders, you allow people like us to be ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so tips on communicating with a high D. Bottom line, your points. You know,
Just
I
get
have
to
to.
it.
Yes,
Get to the
I
point.
can go off on it. Us high eyes, how you doing, high eyes? We could go off into tangents. Like if you heard some of my high eye friends and I talk, John, you'd probably be like, "What's the point of this conversation?" We're talking about this, we're talking about hair, and then we're talking about this, and then we might be talking about COVID, and then we're bouncing around, and like there's no like agenda and there's no result. It would drive a high D nuts. So you got to have like, what's the agenda? What's the focusing on it? And this is a tip I've learned in working with high Ds is avoid going into the details, because if they want to know more information, they'll ask you. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. I mean, get to the bottom line. And if I want to know more details, yeah.
yeah, you'll ask. Like that's where I've had other high Cs be like, well, they need to know more information. And that's where I say, well, if they want the result, they're going to ask for more of the information that they care about.
And again, this is one of the things about the Philippines that like is super different where I, I I'd be willing to bet we don't see a lot of high D, and it fits all of this personality stuff. Um, they're not entrepreneurial, and I've said that for years and years and years. They don't want to. They don't want to take your business. They don't want to steal it. They don't want to steal your idea. They don't want to be in charge.
Exactly.
Is what it comes down to. And so, I mean, that's good to know that if you want someone that's going to be in one of those positions, look for a high D, and you have to look for it.
Exactly. Exactly. And if they're a lower D, you don't really have to worry about us, depending on their values, because there's some exceptions to that
Yeah.
rule. Because the values can tell you actually more of really what's driving them. Because there's some very powerful, wealthy entrepreneurs who are high SCs, but their values are different. But I would say, as a general rule, you're right. Us low Ds, we need a partner with high Ds really to get an idea or a business off the ground.
Awesome.
Yeah, stick to the big picture with high Ds. Stick to the big picture. And that's a practice for, let's say, high Cs, because they don't like sticking to the big picture. That's harder for them. Talk faster if you're one of those like slow YouTube videos that you're talking about. You're going to break rapport with the high D if you're a very slow talker and they like to talk fast. And this is my biggest like gift to people who are low Ds or, low Ds married to high Ds. Don't take their abrupt, blunt, direct approach personally. It's just how they communicate. My bestie's a high D. If I have bad breath, she will tell me. She won't mince it. She'll say, do you have a mint? Do you need to brush your teeth? She won't be like nice about it. She'll just tell me. And I used to take that personally like, oh, I have bad breath. That's how she communicates. That's how high Ds communicate. That's their style. It has nothing to do with you. And if you want a tip on building rapport with high Ds, acknowledge their passion, because very few people do that. Because high Ds appear so confident and they appear like, they've got everything together. Very few people take the time to acknowledge their passion. They're usually getting feedback that they're being too blunt or they're moving too fast or they're intimidated. And so if you acknowledge their passion, that's going to really help in building that rapport.
So, I mean, one of the biggest feedbacks I've gotten from my team, or like I've asked my team in the Philippines to like give advice, and one of the things they've always said is, your employer is probably very blunt. Don't take it personally, right? I mean,
Really?
that'd be super common. Like you're an entrepreneur. That's how you talk. And the Filipinos, that's not their thing generally, and so they're gonna. Like that's one of their advice. Don't take this personally. They're going to be very direct with you.
Yes. Yeah. I love that they tell each other. I love that they do that, because that's such a good heads up. Like, okay, I know that has nothing to do with me. I love that pre-frame. I love that they do that. Okay. So this is the best gift I can give high Ds. And this is something that I reinforce over and over and over in my coaching with high Ds. So instead of blowing up at others, the best way for high Ds to recharge is physical, vigorous activity. And of course, like we don't need to go into all the benefits of physical exercise for all of us as humans, but I'm specifically talking about the psychological benefits for high Ds to exercise. Whenever I have a high D client who is depressed, wrestling with a lot of anxiety, the first thing I'll ask him or her is about their exercise routine. because that's going to make more of an impact. Because you think about like high Ds, you guys are, you have all this passion and all this energy. You need to have a way to be able to release it out of your body. And that's why, like, you know, Russell loves to wrestle, and he's into, you know, weightlifting, and he likes to be challenged that way. He needs to have that because he's a very high D like you. So if you don't have that physical activity, you're going to be angry. You're going to turn in the Hulk.
I ride my bike almost every day.
Really?
And not just ride, like I go climb mountains on my bike. Or like in the winter when there's snow, that's all I want to do. Like I just want to go climb a mountain. I didn't realize that's like built in.
That's your therapy.
Yeah.
You're giving your wife a gift.
I told my wife, like, this fills my soul.
Yeah. I mean, those are powerful words you just said. Fills your soul. Like that's, yeah. So I would encourage you to always have that routine, because you're going to be a better husband, a better father, a better leader, just a better human being by having that in place, because it really is just the best thing to manage all that energy and passion that you have inside.
Yeah. I bet a lot of people watching this are high D also. We get so many entrepreneurs that are doing this. I bet, you know, like, look at your exercise routine and make sure you have it. So. Yes.
And, you know, I have some high Ds who are clients who are older, and they have some health challenges. And so I tell them, you don't have to necessarily get into CrossFit, but you got to do something that is challenging for you and where you're at. And so whether it is like, let's say, going for a walk and, like, you know, getting your body moving and, you know, sweating, there's so many ways that you can be able to get this need met and to make sure that you have priority for it. And even if it's just 10 to 20 minutes a morning, you know, 10 to 20 minutes a day, it doesn't have to be an hour and a half. It could be a short amount of time, 3 or 4 times a week. That's, of course, better than nothing. Okay, us high I's. So I stands for influence. I's, so like the D's are driven by anger, and they're very results oriented. I's are driven by the need to be liked. You want to build rapport with a high I, just tell us you like us. We're the easiest to build rapport with because we want to be liked. Now, like the high D's, so the high D and the high I are extroverted. The high S and the high C's are introverted. But D's are results oriented. So D's want to know the outcome. They want to know the result. I's are people oriented. So it's a very different type of focus for the high I's. That's why high I's come across very friendly, trusting, optimistic, funny, charming. Just like high D's, though, they also talk fast. They tend to move fast. High I's make great politicians, comedians, Jim Carrey, the late Robin Williams, Ellen DeGeneres, all great examples of extremely high I's. And something I want to point out here, John, is like for people looking at their DISC results, like the number on your DISC matters. So like, for example, if you're watching this and you're a 53I, you're technically a high I. But someone like an Ellen DeGeneres or a Jim Carrey, they're a 99I. So it's like the intensity of where you're at really matters. So you may be high I thinking, well, I'm not like a comedian like these people. I'm not as extreme. Or if you're a 99, you're like, oh, no wonder I'm always goofing around. No wonder. So it's about the intensity. Just like a high D could be a 53D, or you could have a 99D. That's still, it's still 2 high Ds, but the 99D is going to come across even more intensely than that 53D. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, totally.
So that's why I really like to point that out, because I know for people that are, lower on the scale, it can get confusing. So high I's, if I can show you that I like you, you'll like me back and follow my lead. So they use charm and charisma. And that's why, like for sales, a D and an I combo are the most ideal. They're entertainers. They love to have a good time. They love a good audience. The high I's, you think of like the high I's in your family and the family gatherings. They tend to be like the jokesters or the clowns. They tend to make phenomenal public speakers. Our mutual friend, Russell, is also a high I in addition to be a high D. He's one of the best storytellers, right? They love change. They love people. Popularity is paramount. So if you have children who are high I's, it's really important that they feel like they're accepted and they belong. If you have children that are lower I's, they're not going to care as much about what other people think. Us higher I's, we're going to care more about what everyone thinks of us. We want to get that acceptance and that approval. And that's why we tend to be people pleasers. They can easily get bogged down by the details, despise long projects. Now, again, something I want to teach your entrepreneurs watching this is if you look at a disc, see, when I look at a disc, I look at the entire disc. So if you have someone like Russell's assistant, Melanie, she's a CSI. So she's got some I, but it's not her highest. And because she's a high C and a high S, she does not get bogged down by details. But when we're just training and talking about these behavior styles isolated, like if someone is just a high I, you don't want to have them in something that is going to be a long project with lots of details. But if they're a high I combined with the high C, then that's completely different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important to look at someone's entire disc. They tend to dream too much. Like I said, John, my friends and I that are high I's, we go off on tangents that would drive you high D's nuts. You'd be like, what's the point of this conversation? We could be very chatty to strangers and friends and family, whereas lower I's, they're just naturally not that way. That's why you want to have high I's in roles. Like if you have someone that's got to deal with like customer service or someone answering the phone, a receptionist or something like that, then you want them to be a high I because they're just going to be naturally friendly. A low I is not going to be naturally friendly.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these roles then.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking the same thing. Like if you had some specific roles that would be good to look for someone who is high I would be customer support.
Customer support with a high S though. I wouldn't have a low S in customer support.
Okay, high I, high S. So how about a social media marketer?
Yes, definitely.
Someone's on social media, right?
Low I's would hate social media.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you got to have a high I in social media.
Yeah, so a high I for a social media marketer.
Anything that has to do with communication with people. So like anything like that, like if you have someone responding, or like a receptionist or someone that's like got to make calls or like an affiliate manager. I don't know if any of your entrepreneurs have like affiliate managers. You want your affiliate manager to be a high I. You think about any position where it's really about relationships. So like I'm a coach. I'm a very high I. It'd be really hard to be a coach as a low I. I've met some coaches that are low I's and they didn't really like coaching because guess what? Coaching's about people, right? And so it's like if you're constant, like who is having to interact with your audience or interact with your clients, you ideally want them to be a high I.
So like even someone who's, one of the tasks that I have people do is participate in forums. Right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to go comment on other people's comments. I've had people that I've assigned this to and they just don't do it. And I'm like, why are you not doing it? And this is probably why, because they're super low I and they probably hate it and I had no idea.
Yes, exactly.
So anything where you're communicating with others, you're going to look for a high I.
Exactly. If there's a lot of interaction with people, it's just going to be better for them. Even if they have like a little bit of I, like Melanie, Russell Brunson's assistant, she's primarily in charge of tasks, but she also is Russell's gatekeeper. And she's got enough I to be warm and friendly, but not too much where it's going to distract her from her job. So like that's a CSI is honestly like the dream combination for something like an assistant.
Okay, so for a virtual, like a VA, a general VA, someone who's going to do whatever you ask them to do, a CSI would be the dream. But I know of some rock star VAs who are CSs or SCs. Sure, for sure.
But if they're not dealing with a lot of people, because SCs and CSs can come across kind of cold. Because they're a lower I, they're not going to smile, they're not going to laugh at your jokes, they're not going to put a happy face at the end of the email, they're not going to do exclamation points.
Yeah.
Right.
So like someone who's managing client accounts, where they're going to be talking to the people, you're talking to your customers. You want a high I.
Oh, 100%. Anybody talking to your customers, you want to have a high I, because they're
Awesome.
going to be warm. They're going to be friendly. They're going to have a natural communication style that you just can't train.
Yeah.
It's like
Awesome.
you just can't train it. Yeah. Yeah. And so these are some examples of famous high eyes. My favorite is Elf. Like, it's one of my favorite Christmas movies. I mean, he's such a high eye. Like, I would say his character is a high eye and that's it. Like, he's like a 99 eye and that's it. Because all he wants is to be liked, and he wants to play and he wants to have fun, and that's a high eye. So, and these are some more examples. Steve Martin, one of my favorites, Robin Williams, Will Smith. Will Smith's a high eye. Woody from Toy Story, high eye. Donkey from Shrek, high eye. Han Solo. So again, they make great salespeople, public relations, trainers. You know, if you have someone like on your team or your company's design where you have people training, high eyes make great trainers because they make like teaching maybe some dry content fun. Then you want to have a high eye as a trainer. And of course, they're great motivational speakers. So best jobs for high eyes: sales, coaches, therapist. Again, look at the theme we have here: dealing with people, PR, teachers, advisors. High eyes are the ultimate people oriented professions.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think that gives people so tips for communicating with a high eye: pause to ask personal questions. You know, like, oh, how old's your dog Whiskey, Mandy? Or, you know, how long you been married? Or like, how did you meet your husband? Or, you know, it's like we like to have the personal questions. If it's always brass tacks down to business, you know, we're not having as much fun. We
Yeah.
like to have more of that personal interaction. High eyes are very optimistic. You know, the higher the eye, the more optimistic and positive they are. They're very complimentary. So if you're a lower eye, I have some low eye clients, John, who manage high eyes. And I've given them the homework assignment of like practice complimenting them, because low eyes don't naturally do that. That's just not their nature. So you want to build rapport with us high eyes. We're the easiest to build rapport with because we just want to be liked. So if you just like us, we're going to like you back.
Awesome. I like it. I love it.
Right?
So, like,
Right?
it's so good for the social media marketer role.
Right. It
Yeah.
is. It is. And because if you think about it, I know that there's some technology with the social media role, but now with training, it's you don't even have to be a high C to do that. And
Yeah.
even though it's online, just imagine who you would want to go network at an actual event for you. You would
Right.
want a high eye. It's
So
the same.
a network marketer,
Yes.
hiring someone to help them is you're going to want a high eye.
Oh my gosh, 100%. Can I go off on one quick network marketer tangent?
Yeah.
Like, I have coached so many low eyes who were beating themselves up that they hated network marketing. Like, you're a low eye. Don't do it. That's not your role. You're so much better at something else. And so, yeah, you want someone to be in a network marketing role. If you have someone on your team that's in a network marketing role, you want to have a high eye because they're going to enjoy it. They're going to love it. And the best way to recharge for us high eyes is we got to just go out and have fun. You know, we got to just like let our hair down, and where there's no agenda, there's no outcome, and we just get to laugh and have fun. That's how we recharge as high eyes. There's a lot of high eyes, you know, right now because of COVID that are really hurting, you know, and there's only
Yeah.
so many Zoom parties we can go to. And so high eyes really need to have that engagement. I have some clients who have kids who are high eyes, and you know, they're really restless right now. It's like, yeah, they need to have some play dates. Of course, you know, make sure that you feel safe and your kids are safe, but they need that for their mental health. Just like high Ds need to have that physical vigorous activity, high eyes, we need to laugh and like just be goofy and be able to have fun without any agenda. Dun, da, 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 here we go with the high S's. You want high S's on your team. High S's, when I first learned DISC in 1999, John, Robert Alderman said, you want something done, ask an S to do it. Because us S's, we're driven by the need to serve. We are the most reliable of all the DISC. So S's are introverted. We're also people-oriented, like the I. So the D's results-oriented, I and the S people-oriented, C's are task-oriented. S's are steady, we're consistent, we're loyal. You know, the people where, you know, how long have you worked here? And they say 35 years and you're like, how is that possible? You know, they're a high S. That's how that's possible. We high S's, we love routine. I get up the same time every morning. I walk my dog the same path. I make my morning celery juice. I have my routine. I like to be able to do that. I order my groceries the same time every week. We love to have that. Us, like low S's listening to this are like, oh my gosh, that sounds awful. Because low S's like to have variety and spontaneity, and they don't like to have that structure. We high S's, that's why we're really good at organization. That's why you can count on us. So they're very good at systems and organization. They tend to move slower though. And this is a tip for parents because, of course, myself being a high S, I have a soft spot in my heart for us fellow high S's. You know, if you have children who are high S's, you need to give them more time, like to get ready. The worst thing you can do to us high S's is to rush us. And we already live in a culture where we're constantly rushed. We live, especially our American culture. Our American culture is a very low S culture because it's like go, 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 go. It's fast paced. We kind of worship in a way productivity and speed. So as high S's, if you can help us by, you know, providing a buffer, and if you have a high S on your team, we need to know what you expect from us. So you high D's, you can make stuff up on the fly. You could start from scratch. You can, you know, build a rocket ship overnight. Us high S's, we're not the same way. We need to know, what do you expect from us? The biggest mistake that I see in high D's who are business owners who hire, you know, you want high S's. By the way, ClickFunnels is 90% high S's. That's why it gets, you know, why so much gets done at ClickFunnels. Like Russell's team is primarily high S's because they're reliable. Now, the biggest mistake that owners make with their team of high S's is they don't let them know what's expected of them. We high S's, we're the ones, when you go to a seminar and you know how there's like the agenda of the seminar and like who's speaking at what time, high D's are like throwing that away. Like they're not like, I'm just going to show up and go. Us high S's, we're taking a picture of it on our phone. We're re-looking at it. We're mapping out our schedule, our lunch. Like we want to know, what is the agenda? What's expected? That's really going to lower our stress.
Yeah. So I think we see so much, culturally, we see so much of this in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. If they know what's expected of them and they have a very clear agenda, it's going to lower their stress. And then what that does, as we all know, is that's going to increase their productivity. And so you really want to, and you want to give them plenty of time to do their job. So if they say, this is going to take me a week and you want it in 3 days, you just stressed out a high S.
And yeah, dang, like we see that so much where like you stress them out, then it gets worse.
Yeah.
Then they're going to worry that they're not going to get it done and it's going to disappoint you. And then they're going to do worse work.
They are. They are. We high S's, we will work overtime. High S's are like the loyal soldiers that will go to war for you. We'll get bloody for you if we know that you've got our backs. Like they will give you so much more if you let them know that they're safe and they're respected. Because high S's tend to get taken advantage of. High S's tend to get, you know, bulldozed. And so make sure that they have plenty of time. Like if you ask a high S, how much, this is what I want. This is the project I want done. And instead of you giving them a deadline, and ask them, how much time do you need? You know, and then that'll be like, oh, this is so nice. Thank you. Because you're right.
That's such good advice. That's such good advice. For working, I mean, yeah, with an S. Yeah, because we're going to give you more, because we're driven by the need to serve.
So if we feel like we're serving you, guess what? We're happy. You lower S's are like, I don't understand that, because you're not driven that way. It's just a different way. It's not a better or worse than. Again, we all need different types, but you take care of your high S's and they will go far and beyond for you.
I feel like you just described the culture of the Philippines.
Wow. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to make them feel safe. You want to, just like you admitted your dirty, dark secret about wanting to be the best. High S's, guess what high S's want to hear? They want to hear, thank you. They want to hear, I appreciate you. They want to hear, oh, I could not have done this without you. Because we're driven by the need to serve. So if we get a thank you, if we get an appreciate you, I couldn't have done this without you. We're like, like that's our equivalent to how you feel when you win and I'm the best. That's ours. Is we've got to have that. So the more that you appreciate them and the more that you thank them, not just, of course, with obviously paying them, and that's assumed, but if you go above and beyond and let them know that how much that you appreciate their work, that's just going to make them feel better, and they're going to feel safer, and guess what? They're going to want to give more.
Yeah. Wow. It makes this so much more understandable now to me. Like why certain things that I've done have worked so well and other things have not. That's so good.
Yeah. Well, and here's something too, because I'm assuming you're a low S, John.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So here's the thing for you to understand about high S's too, and especially if you're a high D. We don't tell you when we're upset. So here's what we do instead. We keep like a journal. Oh, John just upset me. Tick mark. But I'm not telling you. Because I'm driven by the need to serve. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm not going to tell John that he upset me or that email kind of hurt my feelings. I'm going to vent to my husband or I'm going to vent to some of my friends about it, but I'm not going to tell John. Now that's really foreign to a high D, because a high D is like you upset a high D. You're going to know you upset a high D right away within seconds, right? So us high S's though, So here's what we do instead. We do, tick mark, upset me, tick mark, upset me, tick mark, don't say anything. And then here's what happens if you're in a relationship with a high S, you have a high S on your team, then one day you're going to experience the high S volcano where we're like, you did this and you did that and you did this and you did that. And then we pull out our roster that you have amnesia on, that you completely forgot about, but we're keeping tabs. So here's my advice to high Ds managing high S's is if your spidey senses are telling you something's wrong, listen to it. And you ask us, what's wrong? Is everything okay? And we're going to lie. The first time we're going to lie. We're going to say, yeah, everything's fine. Everything's great. But your spidey senses are saying, something's wrong. You got to kind of dig and go, no, really, I want to know, like, how a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being you love your job, 1 not at all, where would you put it at? I really want to know, and you're not going to upset me, and this is a safe place. Like, you're going to keep your job. I really want to know how you're doing. Like, you got to, if you really want to know what's going on with us, whether you're married to us, whether it's a child, whether it's a team member, you've got to kind of like lovingly interrogate us. That's how you can help prevent the high S volcano. Otherwise it's going to happen and you're going to be like, that was out of the blue.
So in the Philippines, I think one of the ways this volcano happens is they disappear.
Yes, that's something that we do as a disappearing act.
So I mean, it's so good to hear these things, like to confirm exactly what you need to do to manage your team that you're hiring. Tell them you're happy with them. Tell them you like their work. Tell them thank you. Give them expectations. Give them time to do their work. This is so good. And for anybody watching this, whether you're just hiring or you're already managing people, after you've hired, this is what to expect with the Philippines.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, and because you're not like in a relationship with them and like they're a VA, I could see them disappearing because high S's, if they're a high S, and I'm guessing most of them are low Ds, they don't like confrontation and they don't like conflict. So they're just not going to tell you.
Yeah, they do not want to have a confrontation.
Yeah.
And so, and this is like the biggest problem that people deal with in the Philippines is the disappearing VA. Like you spend a bunch of time recruiting someone, and to have them disappear is such an issue because then you have to go back through the pain of recruiting again, and you don't want to do that. So it's
Yeah.
just way easier if you recognize they are high S probably,
Hmm.
and you can go like you're saying, go search out like what is it, what's going on here, what's wrong? I know something's
Yes.
wrong. Tell me, tell me, tell me. Get
Yeah.
it out, and usually it's something that's super fixable.
Yes. Yes. I had a high S client who requested to transfer a department because her manager told her that she was kind of a stickler. That one comment, and I'm sure that manager like was a Heidi, was like, you're kind of a stickler on this, Joanne, aren't you? You know, that one comment got underneath her skin. I asked her, I go, did you tell him that bothered you? Oh, no, 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 no. So you could have sent an email, you could have said one thing, and you have no idea. So the thing to do, besides also like, lovingly interrogate, is to get to know them. Because remember, us high S's were people oriented. And so even though they're doing these tasks for you and they're on their team, and it's not like, you might be thinking, well, I'm not going to be their friend. But if you do become more friendly with them and you find out, are they married? Do they have children? Get to know a little bit about them. What do they dream about? Do they want to travel? How are they doing with this COVID thing? Like, what's it like for them? Then you're going to decrease decrease the likelihood of them disappearing. Because if they don't think that you care about them, they're not going to care about you, and they're going to do that disappearing act. But guess what? We are so loyal. So if we feel like you care about us and you know us, then we're not going to want to do that disappearing act. But if you treat us just like a number and we're just, a taskmaster, and you're just a taskmaster, we just got to get this done, and you don't really know anything about us, then disappearing is going to be that much easier.
Wow. I mean, I feel like you just gave one of my slides from my presentation that about the
Really?
Philippines. Like
Oh,
it's
interesting.
this has got to be the Philippines culture is just high
Yeah.
S. I mean,
Yeah.
so this is
Yeah.
so good for employers to know as you hire people. This is what you're dealing with.
Yeah. It'll be worth it to get to know us.
Yeah,
Get
and
to
well, they're
know your high
so
S's.
dang loyal. They're so
Yes.
loyal.
Yes. We have so much guilt to not. I know high S's that have turned down more lucrative jobs because they didn't want to be disloyal.
Super
So,
common in the Philippines. Super,
yeah.
super common.
Take care of them, get to know them, find
Yeah.
out what their spouse's name is, find out their birthdays, right? Their children's names, children's birthdays.
So then that steadiness, consistency, loyalty, you can, no, let's see the next slide because I was going to talk about roles.
Yeah, so this is just to describe more like we don't want to rock the boat. Can we just all get along, right? Emotional peaks and valleys because, we tend to suppress our anger. So that's why we can explode. We move slowly and methodically. We love productive routines. We love them, and we love to color coordinate them. We're extremely loyal. We like tranquility and serenity. We don't like chaos. We don't like fast. We don't like that. We like to have, like, that's why we're the steady eddies. We're easy to get along with. We're mild mannered. We tend to have like pictures of our family. Like, I'm looking at my desk, it's all pictures of family and friends. Always make time for people. We're amazing listeners. Low S's struggle with listening. Us high S's, because we're just more patient. We're better listeners. We will quietly do what we're told, but sometimes under our breath, we might complain, even if we disagree. We tend to not be very flashy. Again, we're making the best employees. So here's some famous examples of high S's. I mean, Eeyore. So, Mr. Rogers, I've saw the movie, It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and oh my gosh, such a good movie. Tom Hanks plays Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, definitely a high S. And you learn more about him. He was all about a man of routine. Princess Diana. I mean, people tend to love high S's because we're just very likable and lovable and mild mannered. Skywalker, Princess Diana. I think the next slide is jobs. Okay. So counselors, coaches make great high S's because we listen. Nurses, great high S's. Assistants, like Melanie, Russell's assistant, is a very high S. Customer support. You want in your customer support role, you want a high S. A low S is gonna because think about customer support, that's a lot of patience, no matter what you're doing. So you want us high S's in that role. Human resources, because it's all about serving. Therapist. Oh, I have nurse on here twice. My apologies for that.
That's fine.
Is there anything you'd like to add to like the roles of a high S with that?
I mean, you said assistant, just a general virtual assistant. You just described it perfectly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You want an assistant, customer support. I mean, besides sales and some like chief executive positions in your company, you pretty much want all S's on your team.
Wow. That's
You
super
pretty
interesting.
much, because we're reliable. Asking us to do it. Now, if you have a job where, like I had a job when I was, when I was administrative assistant for Tony's sales team, like the best people on that team were low S's because like we were traveling and it was a new city. And even though, I had the appearance of looking like I had a great life as a high S, I hated that job, not just because of the admin, but because it was constantly new. I hated that. Low S's, so if you have a role that's like constantly changing and it's got a lot of variety, then you want more of a low S in that role.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So again, some of this I've already said, but to reinforce, you got to let us know what you're expecting. If we don't know what you want, we get anxiety. Let them know their agenda. Let them know what you expect. Exactly. Don't let them, and especially high Ds, think that other people are like high Ds, that we could just come up with things from scratch. We do not come up with things from scratch. We do not like that. We need to have an idea of what you want. Acknowledge their kind and giving nature. Just like we want to acknowledge you, high Ds, for your passion, we like to be thanked for our kind and giving nature because we tend to get taken advantage of. Give us plenty of space and time to do the tasks. Again, we hate being rushed. You probably have lost, I'm going to guess based on what you just shared with me, John, people have probably lost some really good VAs just because they gave them unrealistic time frames.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I'll talk about is like, they don't work well under pressure. People in the Philippines.
Yes. You know how that saying, like, you high Ds do though. You high Ds shine under pressure.
And obviously there's exceptions. I'm not saying that everyone in the Philippines is like this, but culturally
That
it's
makes
an
sense.
S culture.
It is. Well, you think of like, when I give an example of like the States, like you think Hawaii is an S culture, like hang loose, chill. Think of New York is high D. Let's get it done. Let's move fast, get out of my way. Right. Yeah. We kind of already talked about this. Pay extra attention if you believe you upset them. If you believe you've upset them, you probably have. Trust you already have. Trust your gut on that. Or they might be going through something in their life that is causing them stress and it's affecting their job. Just pay attention to that. That's why I say ask again for feedback, because we tend to lie. We do. We tend to lie. Like, oh, no, I'm fine. No, things are great. The first answer is usually not the honest one. That's why you want to dig. Support a consistent, steady routine. Again, we'll respond to a steady routine and an organized experience. We love things to be organized. So here's my favorite coaching feedback for high S's, because most high S's feel guilty doing this. So best way for a high D to recharge is physical, vigorous activity. High I's, they got to go out with their friends and have some fun. High S's, they need to have time to do nothing. Just do nothing. Relax. And a lot of high S's, because we're driven by the need to serve, we have guilt around this. But when I'm coaching high S's, like if I had a high S on my team, I would ask them, how do you recharge? Do you meditate, yoga? Do you watch TV? Do you binge watch Netflix? Like, what do? You read books, you go for walks. Like, if you've got a high S on your team that is really like a rock star and you want to take care of him or her, find out, like, I've heard that people like you need to have your downtime. Or do you have your downtime? How can you support them in having their downtime? Because when we have that self-care in place, we're amazing. We're amazing. We are soldiers. If we don't have that self-care in place, we are cranky. We are short. We're passive aggressive like you've never seen, right? Like high Ds could just become like the Hulk and angry. Us high S's, we can be passive aggressive like no one else. And so we want to make sure, like for your team, like what is their self-care? How do they take care of themselves, and encourage them to have that downtime, because they're going to be a better team member for you.
So good. That's so good.
Yeah. So anything else on high S's you want to remark
No,
on?
I mean,
Okay.
you hit, I think that was so good.
Great. Yeah, it's important to understand this. Now, high C's. I love high C's because I'm not one. and I know the world needs you high C's, and we need high C's to get things done. So high C's are driven by fear. This is so important to understand. So like you high D's, you're driven by anger, passion, want to be the best, right? By the way, John, all high D's have that dirty little secret you have, all of them. They all have that. Like, I do not like playing board games with you high Ds because I just let you guys win. I'm
So
like, oh my
funny.
gosh, this is Monopoly. Chill out. Who cares? But high Ds are like, oh,
I care.
I just want to have fun.
My wife is a high S, high I,
Yes.
and we played Risk the first time years and years ago.
Oh no.
And I didn't tell her how to win. She won't play with me again. We've never played again.
I don't blame her.
Yeah.
It's not a good idea for your marriage.
Right.
It's not a good idea. Yeah, you got to like have your high D take a back seat if you want to ever play. Yeah. So because that's just how you are. Now with high C's are driven by fear, and they get a lot. High C's are probably the most misunderstood of all the behavioral types, because if you think about our culture, especially like the entrepreneur culture and the personal development culture, I come from the personal development culture, and you see those like quotes on being fearless and having no fear. You can't say that to a high C. That's like telling a high D not to have anger. Like, you're going to have it. High C's, they're driven by fear, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing C's are driven by fear, because that's what makes them detailed. That's what makes them perfectionists. You want your surgeon who's operating on your brain to be a high C. You don't want like Jim Carrey being your neurosurgeon, right? Right? So like you want that. And this is why but they can drive the rest of us nuts, because we're like, chill out. Don't worry so much. Like, high C's probably get told not to worry all the time. You worry too much. It's who they are. That's how their brain works. It's how they behave. So they're very introverted. So if you have a high S, high C, on your team, they probably don't like big staff, like Zoom meetings. They're probably uncomfortable with that because they're introverted. If you let's say allow your high SCs to like not use their video on Zoom, they'd probably be the happiest, because they're not extroverted. They don't want to meet and mingle. But one-on-one, they're okay. But in groups, they tend to get uncomfortable, depending on, especially on where they're at on their scale of intensity. They're perfectionists. So if you got a high C on your team, and you want anything that is very detailed. You want your assistant to be a high C, no doubt. You want your assistant to be a high C. Anything administrative, anything that is very task oriented, John, like something that they got to they got to do, and it's a lot of tasks. You want them to be a high C.
So this is where the difference in hiring a virtual worker versus someone in your office is important. A high C, I feel like, makes a good virtual worker. Well, they'll take care of their own junk.
Yes.
Right? Where you don't see them. They never come into your office. You never meet with them.
Yes.
And so for them to take care of it on their own is a big deal. You ask them to do something, and it's going to get done.
Yes.
Right. That's a big deal.
Yes, exactly. They don't want to be bothered. They don't really want to be. They really want to be left alone. Because they're very introverted, and that's why they're great at tech. Like if you have customer support, like with ClickFunnels being a software company, most of the tech support at ClickFunnels are high SCs because it's tech. It's very detailed. Now, if you have a company where it's not as detailed and your customer support could be done by someone like myself, who's more of an IS, then that's different. But if you put me in tech support, you're not going to be happy. I'm going to be like, did you restart your computer? Well, man, I don't know what to tell you.
I can see like sometimes this detail thing would be good for a designer.
Yes.
Like you're going to pay attention to like a user interface designer, for example. You're going to pay attention to why someone is doing what they're doing, and you're going to you're going to think through all of the processes that this design, where this design matters for people.
Yes.
Right. So a high C would be good for that. If you just want something pretty, then I would bet in the design world, a high I is important.
Yes.
Like it's people oriented and it's pretty and.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, because high C's, like, they make the best designers. You want your editor. So if you're having someone edit your podcast or edit your videos, you want them to be a high C.
High C.
They're
Video
going to pay attention.
audio editor.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome.
Anything you think of, anything that really requires a lot of detail, which, let's just face it, a lot in business today requires a lot of detail, you want a high C. Yeah. That's why high SCs are really just very valuable when it comes to a lot of what's needed in business.
So like Google AdWords isn't the most creative thing, but it's very detail oriented.
Oh, yes.
Where like Facebook ads,
yes, high C.
Creative, social thing, but it also requires a lot of details. And so I would say that a Facebook advertiser would probably be a high C, high I. Would be really good for that.
And a good, like could be a high C, high I would probably be like the ideal combo, but a high SC could do well too, just because they're going to understand the systems and the process. And, they could get to the point when it comes to like Facebook ads and social media ads. Like when it comes to the forums that you were talking about and like networking in forums and commenting on forums, that's more of like a high I, right? Yeah. But when it comes to ads are so detailed and there's so much, right? It's an art and a science. Like a high SC is really probably going to be better at, let's say, the ads, where it's like they get to stay and kind of geek out and analyze and figure out what's going to convert and why is this going to convert and and they're going to, and they're introverted and they want to be behind the scenes and they want to do that. But you want someone that's like interacting with the public, or let's say if you're an attractive character like our friend Russell, and let's say you want someone to respond on social media on your behalf, then you're going to probably want more of a high I. But when it comes to like the ads and the nitty gritty behind that, you definitely want a very high C. So
like someone to build your website is probably going to be a high C, would be a good...
Yes.
A good thing. Like the details, they're going to be task oriented, get this done.
Yes. Or a high D who owns a company that's employing a bunch of high Cs.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Because you can have, I know of some great design funnel builders who help people with their funnels and their websites, and they're high Ds and they own the company, but guess what? They're not doing the actual work. So if you want someone just directly, then yes, you want a high C.
I see.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow.
Because they're going to figure things out. They're analytical. That's why I have Einstein on here. They're the most cerebral of all of us,
So like a bookkeeper.
Yes.
You get a lot of people. We get a lot of people that are hiring bookkeepers, right? You're not hiring a high I. This isn't right? You want a high C.
Yes.
Position.
You want a high C. Yeah. A bookkeeper, the ideal disc for a bookkeeper is a high S, high C, because books are consistent, right? They're steady, and then you want them to have the detail to fall through on it.
How about a programmer? What would you...
High C, high SC.
High SC for a programmer.
Because think about being a programmer. So DI, extroverted, SC, Introverted. Think about a programmer. How much time alone does a programmer spend?
Yeah, that's
They're all alone, but they like it because they're introverted.
interesting.
Yeah. Now, there could be just a high C could be a programmer because and a low S. I would prefer more of a high SC just because if they're on my team, I want them to like routine, right?
Yeah.
But if you're hiring, let's say, like Russell has a guy on his team. His name's Miles, who manages events. Miles is a high IC. He's great at events. So because he's great with the people, and Miles is funny, and everybody loves Miles. But he's got the detail with the C, and he's got the low S to be like okay with chaos. Us high S's, we don't like. I would be terrible at managing events.
I met Miles, and
Oh yeah.
I can totally see exactly what you're describing now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. He's a low S, so he can go on with the chaos. He likes it. He likes the variety. And so him in a role where he's managing projects, which are events, then he likes that. But you put Miles like in a role where he's got to do the same thing day in, day out, Monday through Friday, he's not going to last.
So this is interesting because so much of virtual work is like that. It's steady, it's recurring, and a high SC makes sense for so many things.
Yes, it does. It really is like that. Someone who's a high SC is and they have some skills and they have some training. I always say like they're the best employees and team members. Like you could pretty much put them in so many different places.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. So high S's, they'd rather be right than make a friend. So here's what's interesting with high C's is they can sometimes come across as high D's, like in a meeting, because if they think you're doing something that is a mistake, they are going to speak up. Like if they're like, if this is breaking a rule, so like Melanie, Russell's assistant, is a high C. She will speak up because, Russell is a very low C, and he's like, let's do this, let's do that. And Melanie will go, no, we can't. You don't have time for that. You're doing this. So it's like high C's can be very outspoken, and sometimes in their behavior style, you can kind of sometimes wonder, wait a minute, are they a high D? They're just driven by something different. High D's are driven by anger, wanting the result. High C's are driven by fear, and they're wanting things to be done perfectly and accurate. They care about accuracy more than anything else.
Which as a virtual assistant is like generally like that's what most employers that I see hiring, that's what they want.
They do. And they need that. And that's what they need. So like, if you have a high C who's like I've watched Russell and Melanie interact, and one could look at it like that Melanie is in charge of Russell because Melanie is telling Russell, nope, can't do that. Nope. She's like constantly, she's telling him to get off the phone. She's telling, so, you gotta, so like as a high D and you really want a rock star assistant, you got to let them do their job because
awesome.
they're there to support you so that you can get things done. And just know that, especially if they're a high SC, they really want to serve you and they want to do it right. Yeah, they get very irritated by surprises and glitches because they want things perfect. They prefer tasks over people. So that's why they love like to-do lists and tasks, and they like to conquer that. And now, depending on if they're a high I, like our buddy Miles, that's different. If they're a high I, high C, that's why like an event manager for Miles is the best role for him because he's got a unique disc. They're cautious. They're very thorough. They're patient. They tend to, and you're going to always have to kind of push them because they can have analysis paralysis. And so you might have to, as a high D, like employer, you might have to push them like, it's okay. This doesn't need to be perfect. That's something that you're going to always have to remind high Cs because they want things to be perfect.
Awesome. It's fascinating.
They can come across cold. Doesn't mean that they are as human beings, but they can come across cold because they're so focused on the task at hand and wanting to get the task at hand done. And if they're a high C and a low I, they're definitely going to probably come across cold. High C's, Spock, Einstein, Mark Zuckerberg, high C. Bill Gates is a high C. Einstein, Niles from Frasier, total high C. So secretaries, accountants, you want your pilot flying your plane to be a high C. You don't want a low C as a pilot. Architect, engineer. I would add, like what you said, I would add designer. I think that's a good suggestion, John, is designer, computer programmer, scientist, because they like to analyze. They want to figure it out. They want to know what's the truth? What is the right answer? There's a right and a wrong.
Wow.
Best jobs for high C's. Engineers, analysts, scientists, developers, systems administrators, data scientists, investment analysts, actuaries. So it's like you're kind of getting that they are the cerebral type. They're really good at like operations too. I would say operations managers are really good. High C's are really good at that because, as you know, like with operations, there's so much detail.
Yeah. Wow. It's so good. It explains so much.
Right?
Yeah.
And so like they're not going to be as like you said, they could be left alone to do their work. And like the best, I think I might have it here. They prefer to communicate in writing. So like if you like to have like lots of Zoom meetings, like high C's are going to be like, just send them an email, just Slack me. Like they love things in writing. They want precise, factual details. If you have a meeting with the high C, I lost a client years ago, and she was one of my favorite clients. I was really bummed. But she taught me a lesson. She fired me because I was late 3 times in a row for a coaching session. And it was like, Mandy, I can't handle it. It gives me anxiety when you're late. I know you're doing your best. And she really taught me that as a high C, like that drove her nuts. So it's like if you have an appointment with one of your VAs, you're going to be meeting with them, be on time, because every minute you're late, you're giving them anxiety and it makes them not feel safe. So as us low C's, we're like, it's fine, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's all good. Low C's, they're going through a completely different world.
Interesting.
So make sure you're on time. Keep your word. Keep your word with high C's. Don't overpromise them. Don't say, oh, you're going to make this much money. To build trust rapport with high C's, you want to be honest. You want to be realistic. Never tell them to be fearless. Never tell them to stop worrying, because they're not going to. You got a spouse that's a high C. You got a child that's a high C. Don't tell them to stop worrying, because that's not helpful. Instead, encourage them to be analytical. Encourage them to analyze and to geek out and to investigate, because that's their strength. Follow their rules. Like, find out what needs to happen, for them to, like enjoy their job. Like, what needs to happen for you to be like, I love to ask the scale from 1 to 10 question with high C's, because they respond to that. Like, scale from 1 to 10, John, how happy are you with your job? And I really want you to be honest with me. And, 10 is you never want to leave. You're so happy with the pay and the work and everything. 1, not at all. Where would you rate yourself and why? That's kind of a way to find out where your high C team members are.
That's sweet.
Yeah. And give them the space and the time. Again, it's kind of like with the S as well, for doing it right. They want to do it right. The best compliment you could give a high C is they did a perfect job, because they care about perfection.
Sweet.
You want to compliment a high C? Say, oh, that email you wrote was perfect, or that design work you did was perfect. They're like, oh, that's like telling a high D they're the best, is telling a high C that they're perfect. So now, what's the best way for high C's to recharge? Leave them alone. They want private alone time. So when I'm coaching, like, this is so important in relationships. When I'm coaching clients, John, who are married to high C's and they're a low C, like, I had a client tell me where he's like, I lie to my wife that I'm going to the movies alone, that I have a meeting because I don't want to hurt her feelings, but I just want to be alone. And it's like, high C's, like, it's not anything personal. They just need to have that alone time. Just like you high D's recharge with physical vigorous activity, high C's recharge by that private alone time.
Yeah. Sweet. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
So I like to sum this up with like, we need diversity in teams. If we were all high Ds, we'd all want to be in charge and there'd be no one to boss around. If we were all high Is, it would be fun galore, but nothing would get done. High S's, there'd be calm and order, but no adrenaline and zero change. High C's, thorough and accurate, but where would the perfectionism end? And this is a really good, if someone wants to take like a screenshot of this, and I'll email you too, John, this presentation.
Perfect. Sweet.
Yeah. Because like if I were to say, if someone really wants to implement this and remember it, this is a really good like cheat sheet to have at your desk or to be able to pull up, to be able to look at all of them. Like just, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but like high C's, they dislike aggression. What are high D's? They're aggressive.
Yeah.
So you want to tone that down. So this is a good
like this. I could see this piece being really good as people are hiring.
Yes.
And then again, as you manage your team, like, oh, I'm hiring for this role. Well, it's a people-oriented role, or it's a role where you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. What should I like? This would be so good. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is a nice cheat sheet for them to have.
Awesome.
Now, do you want to go into values? Do you have time to go into values?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean,
okay, perfect.
We have
Good.
15 minutes.
Good. Okay. Values are honestly, I'm just as passionate about values as I am DISC, because this gets more personal. And this is like really helping understand, why does someone do what they do, right?
Okay.
And it's because your values are what drive you. You know, you've heard of, there's the science of achievement and there's the art of fulfillment. The people who are the most fulfilled and the most happy tend to have their values met. You have someone you care about in your life and they're not happy, find out what they value and encourage them to follow that. It's a game changer. Okay. So, and by the way, none of these values are better or worse than any other. We need all types. So the first value I'm going to go over is economic. So that's why I have Tom Cruise here is show me the money and Jerry Maguire. Economic people, yes, they are about the money. It is true. So if you get someone that is high economic and they're in a job that you're not going to be paying them that much and there's no growth, they're probably not going to last. So this is...
How do we determine what people's values are? Was there...
So there is a DISC and values test.
Okay.
So there's like, if you, I think 24 by 7 assessments has it too. I know Tony Robbins on his site has it.
Okay.
What you want to do is you can Google DISC and values assessment.
Okay.
I always have people take the DISC and the values, because like when you're hiring, especially like entrepreneurs, and like if you are concerned of like, oh, are they going to want my job? Are they going to take this away? If they're high economic, then you want them in sales. You want them in affiliate relation. You want them in something where they're
commission based.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to last if they're really high economic. Because they're not just about the money though. They're also about ROI, meaning they could be doing this job because they value the experience that's going to turn into something later. So that's always something to keep in mind. You know, when I'm coaching people who are high economic, you know, like Russell's very high economic. A lot of people in his like inner circle mastermind, very high economic. Very great business people tend to be high economic because whatever we value, we tend to be good at. High economic people tend to be good at business because why? You value it. You're constantly looking at what's the ROI? What's my return on investment? Us people who are lower economic, I'm lower economic, we tend to not be as good at it. Why? Because we don't care as much. It doesn't drive us. It's not the fuel. Theoretical. These are the people you don't want to play Trivial Pursuit with because you won't win. These are the people, so people that are very high theoretical, they love to learn. So if you get someone that's like a high SC in a job where you're like programming and it's constantly changing, they have to constantly learn, you want them to be high theoretical. High theoretical people love to learn about anything and everything. So if you're having someone though that's high economic and then they're high theoretical, they only want to learn about what's going to make them money. But if you have someone that's just high theoretical and that's their number one value, those are the people that know random facts about trees. They know what kind of mushrooms are being served. Are these shiitake or are these, they're high theoretical. They know so much about so much. They're great to have on your team because they're nerds. They love to learn. They love to watch YouTube videos and learn more things.
Yeah, so not super important in like a data entry role,
No.
but in a programming, a systems admin, maybe
Yeah.
even a Facebook advertising where it changes
Yes.
so much, or there's more
Yes.
ways to make this work, or conversion optimization, or things like that.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
Something that is constantly having to learn, you're going to want them to be high theoretical. It doesn't have to be their number one, but you want it to be high up. You want to look at the intensity on their graph.
Yeah.
Yeah. Political. So if someone is high political, they've got to be in charge. People who are high political, they value responsibility. I had a client, John, years ago. He was one of my oldest clients. He was 88 years old, and he hired me because he was like, I'm driving my wife nuts, Mandy. She says I need to stop being so blue. And I just looked over his disc and his values. His number one value is political. And I asked him, what did he do? And he was a COO at a job. He had a lot of responsibilities. He was retired. He was bored. I go, you need to go lead something. So he got involved with Kiwanis. In less than a year, he was the president. He was so happy. So people who are high political, they have to be in charge of something. So you have someone on your team that's high political, give them a title. Give them something to be in charge of. It'll make their day. They value that responsibility and leadership.
Or if you're looking for someone to lead, like a project manager, you want to look for political in it.
Exactly. Like, I don't know if you've met Robbie Summers, who is in charge of sales for ClickFunnels. He's a high D, high I, so you can imagine. And his number one value is political. Number one. So he loves the responsibility that Russell has given him of being in charge of sales for ClickFunnels. Loves it. So yes.
Awesome.
Individualistic. Here we go. They value freedom. So another word for individualistic is freedom. I'm very high individualistic. When Russell wanted me to be a coach for Inner Circle and help out his Inner Circle team, I asked him if I could be able to work from home because I love being home right now. I got my dog Whiskey at my feet. I love the freedom. So if you have someone that's high individualistic on your team, I would ask them, what does freedom look like to you? Like, do they have to be on this Zoom meeting that you have every Monday morning? Like, if that hinges on their freedom, they may hate their job because of that one thing. So just asking them, what does freedom look like for you? It looks like for me that I can work at night. Like, you don't have to have me in the morning, or, with the Philippines and the time zone. Like, if you have, someone that's high individualistic, you want to support what freedom looks like for them.
Awesome. Okay.
Regulatory. So if you've seen Fiddler on the Roof, tradition. So this is so important. And I'm going to take a shot. This is a total guess, John. I could be wrong. But I'm going to guess that you're going to come across a lot of people in the Philippines that are very traditional, because it just tends to be like, especially with high S's. So people that are value regulatory, they're very traditional. They believe this is how life is meant to be lived. Yeah. And it's very personal. So someone who's high regulatory, it could show up as religious. It could show up as CrossFit, where that's like their religion. It could show up in veganism, like how they eat, right? Or the keto diet. I'm a vegan, or I'm a keto, or whatever. It could show up. I had a good friend who was in AA, and he went every Monday night to his AA meeting for like over 20 years. And if you wanted to break rapport with my friend, you would ask him, hey, can you just skip this AA meeting? It's not a big deal. He was highly regulatory. You don't do that. So it's like, if you have someone on your team that's highly regulatory, you want to find out what that is so you don't break rapport. Because if it's a religious or spiritual or something like that, you want to make sure that you respect it, because that's going to really help build trust and rapport. And if you're ignorant, if you're blind to know what it is that they value, there's a good chance that you could say or do something that you don't even realize that could really break rapport with them, because this is what they care about. This is like what they value. If I had someone high regulatory on my team, I want to find out, what is it about? My husband's very high regulatory. He's extremely passionate about politics. I always get uncomfortable if someone disagrees with him in politics. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, here we go. Because he's like, he really cares about it. I'm lower on the regulatory. So it's just important to know, how does that show up for them?
Yeah.
Altruistic. Here we go. Mother Teresa. Altruistic. I'm very high altruistic. That's why I love coaching. We want to help. We want to serve. We're driven by the need to make an impact. We've got to feel like we're making a difference. We're driven by that. Guess what? Melanie, Russell's assistant, high altruistic. She's a high CSI and her number one value is altruism. That's like the perfect for an assistant. If Melanie was a high CSI and she was high economic, she'd be a completely different person.
Yeah.
So if you really want, like, for your assistant, and this is like really dreaming, John, like, I mean,
right.
This doesn't have to be perfect, right? But if we're going to dream about like who's the ideal for assistants, if they have that high altruistic, they're going to want to serve. They're going to want to make a difference.
Awesome.
Yeah. Customer support. Now, aesthetic. So you mentioned, I wanted to get to this, but I didn't want to confuse people. You mentioned design. John Parks is in charge of Facebook ads for ClickFunnels. He's really good at it. He's really good at design. Guess what? He's very high aesthetic. Guess what? Russell is high economic, but guess what? Many people don't know this about Russell. He's also very high aesthetic. So it's like, if you want someone in design, building your website, building your funnel, you want them to be high aesthetic.
Interesting. As one of their core values. High
aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're going to be good at it. I'm very low aesthetic. You don't want me designing or decorating anything because I'm like blind to that. So that's why you want to have someone who's high aesthetic to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then that's my favorite quote, know thyself, Socrates. So the more you know yourself, the more you can be able to understand your team, and then just the better leader, of course, you are. And then we all get our needs met, right? It's like you get the profit from your business. And you know what I find with business owners is most of them really want to figure out, how can I enjoy this journey? Well, one of the ways to enjoy it is to have a happy team. How do you have a happy team? You got to know them and understand them.
Get them in the right roles.
Exactly.
Hire people according to their personality for the correct roles. When you have people, get them in the right roles. Yeah. This has been so enlightening for me. Even as the second time that and this was slightly different than the first time I saw it, but so enlightening for how to hire the right people. And after hiring, I mean, I can see people on my team right now that are like, oh, I see why she keeps doing this over and over and over again. I get it. Okay. So, I need to change something there.
There's always a reason for, this is going a little deeper, but there's always a reason for everyone's behavior. And it's when you figure out what that reason is, it's just going to make you a better leader. Yeah.
Mandy, this has been so good. Thank you so much.
This was fun, John. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. If people want to reach out to you for more, how can they get you?
I'm a big fan of Instagram, but I'll give them both my email and my Instagram. Mandy J. Keene, Keene on Instagram, or people can just email me. I don't have an assistant. I check my own email, so you can just email me directly, mandy@mandykeene.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, John.
Yeah, this has been awesome. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, take care. Thank you.